In the 1980s, small trucks were all the rage, and almost every manufacturer had one. But late to the party in 1986, Jeep jumped into the market only to leave just a few short years later. But why? Well, welcome back to All Cars Y'all. If you're new here, my name is John, and this is a far too brief history of the Jeep Comanche. Starting in the 1970s, small trucks from Japan began to gain in popularity. The Big Three joined in, rebranding those trucks for themselves as the Chevy Love, the Ford Courier, and the Dodge Ram 50. But due to the chicken tax, these were expensive and complex to import, and by the early 80s, the Big Three designed their own small trucks. Ford had the Ranger, Chevy the S10, and eventually, in 1987, Dodge had the Dakota. But Little American Motors, the fourth of the Big Three, stood by on the sidelines. Their Jeep brand had had trucks, including a forward-controlled truck, since after World War II, and in 1962, they'd introduced the full-size J10 pickup based on the popular Wagoneer. It became commonly known as the Gladiator, and lasted until 1972. AMC purchased Kaiser Jeep in 1970, and in 1971 began exploring taking their new Hornet model and turning it into a pickup called the Cowboy. Aimed at challenging both the small imported trucks as well as the Chevy El Camino, ultimately AMC's limited production capacity meant that they had to choose between the Cowboy or a hatchback Hornet, and the pickup quietly faded away. In 1981, they also took the CJ7, lengthened the wheelbase to 103.5 inches, and created the CJ8 Scrambler. Never a strong seller, topping out at just 8,300 units in its first year, it became modestly famous for President Ronald Reagan owning one on his ranch. In 1984, the famous Jeep XJ, the Cherokee, was introduced, and American Motors began working on making a small truck from it, an unusual decision as the XJ was unibody. The company was in dire need of cash, and a new vehicle created on the cheap could help while they prepped their new Brampton assembly plant and the launch of their mid-sized Premier. For the Comanche, the engineers kept the front cab portion of the Cherokee, including its unibody construction, but the rear was designed with a separate and removable box and body-on-frame with unusually deep, fully boxed 8-inch rails, a setup copied from their prototype work on the Cowboy. Initially, with only a 7-foot bed, a 6-foot bed was offered in 1987. Underneath was the Cherokee's Quadrolink front suspension with coil springs, a setup that was later copied for the 93 Grand Cherokee, the 97 TJ Wranglers, and the 94 Dodge Rams. In the rear was a live axle with unusually long leaf springs, giving a good ride and load-carrying abilities. Altogether, it gave the Comanche a base payload capacity of 1,200 pounds, or with their metric ton package, over 2,200 pounds. Under the hood, the Comanche initially offered 3 engines: an AMC 2.5-liter 4-cylinder with fuel injection, a GM carbureted 2.8-liter V6, or a Renault 2.1-liter 4-cylinder turbo diesel. The base transmission was a 4-speed manual with an optional 5-speed or a Chrysler 3-speed automatic. Interestingly, that GM 2.8-liter engine was less powerful while using more gas than the base inline 4. The Comanche offered both 2-wheel drive and the choice of part-time Command Track or full-time Select Track 4-wheel drives. At launch, the base price of a 2-wheel drive model was $7,049, or about $21,000 in 2025 dollars, and making it the least expensive Jeep model. For 1987, the GM V6 was replaced with AMC's legendary 4-liter straight 6, making 173 horsepower and 220 pound-feet of torque, while the base 2.5 was tweaked to 121 horsepower and 141 pound-feet. The new 6 got a 4-speed auto as well. In the 6 years of the truck's run, 6 different transmissions were offered, including a 5-speed manual from Peugeot for the 4-liter engine, but only for 2 model years. The 4-liter was tweaked slightly again for 1988 to 177 horsepower and 224 pound-feet, while the turbo diesel quietly left the chat. In March 1987, Chrysler bought AMC for $1.5 billion and slowly began upgrading the vehicle with Chrysler parts, aiming for more parts commonality and reliability, including in 1991 adding their own engine control electronics and slightly increasing the power of the engines. The 4-liter jumped to 190 horsepower and by 1 to 225 pound-feet and was designated the high output. The 2.5-liter rose to 130 horsepower and 149 pound-feet. Trim lines changed frequently over the run, from the basic custom, the X, XLS, base, and later standardized with the Chief, Laredo, Pioneer, Eliminator, and notably in 1988 the Olympic edition, celebrating the Summer Olympics. In 1992, the Comanche was quietly canceled after successfully selling around 190,000 units. But what happened? Well, the first is that sales had been decreasing at a time when small trucks were starting to fall out of favor. A lot of those small trucks from the import brands like Isuzu or Mazda began to disappear, or in Mazda's case, they switched and began using the Ford platform for their smaller trucks. But more importantly, the Comanche ran up against Chrysler's product planning. At the time, Chrysler held a strict hierarchy among their brands. Dodge had trucks and Jeep had SUVs. The Scrambler had been canceled before Chrysler had bought them. The J10 was canceled soon afterwards as it conflicted with Dodge's own Ram series. In fact, Jeep Eagle dealers had even asked for a version of the Dodge Dakota that was introduced in 1986. With falling sales, the Comanche just simply didn't fit the mold and the market anymore. Of course, this strict lineup didn't end up holding, as Dodge got the Durango in '98, and even the future Jeep Liberty was being rebadged as the Dodge Nitro. But Jeep was still being starved of trucks. Oh, and Dodge ended up stopped selling trucks anyway in 2011 when Ram was spun off into its own brand. But 27 years later, in 2019, Jeep got another shot. The Gladiator name returned on a new Wrangler-based 4-door truck, that name winning out over reviving the Scrambler or the Comanche. Thanks so much for being here, and a special thanks to my patrons whose support help make videos like this possible. If you love news opinions and little factoids like this, please consider supporting the channel. If you like the video, well, there is a button for that below, and I appreciate you spending just a few minutes with me. In 1988, the Olympic edition, celebrating the Summer Olympics, the 4-liter jumped to 190 horsepower and 225 pound-feet and was designated